What is up, you jackwagons? I'm Speed Fury, and I'm back with part 4 of What If I Was in the Pokemon anime. Now, last we left off was Drax unfortunately suffering the fact that he is now a father, against his will. And his so-called child in question is actually just a genetically modified Hatterene. Now, normally, he genetically modifies his Pokemon himself with their permission, but he only goes as far as to give them the ability to speak English and not beyond that. The only time where this was not the case was with his Glaceon when it was a complete accident with what happened to her. In which case, she ended up turning into a half human, half Pokemon hybrid instead of just being given the ability to speak human language. But after receiving Hatterene's egg, when it was still an egg, it was revealed to him that his Iron Valiant, now named Gardelade, wanted to also have this kind of thing done to her, as well, for no specific reason other than the fact that she wanted to feel more organic. Luckily, unlike the other members of Drax's team, Iron Valiant or Gardelade, I swap between the two names because I can't really. It's hard for me to just go by nickname sometimes. Anyway, Gardelade is fully robotic, so he could just make robotic modifications to her instead of just using a serum, which he already hates making the serum that he accidentally used on Glaceon. Unfortunately for him, his Hatterene changed herself into the Pokemon human hybrid that he so much hates. Like, he doesn't hate them for doing it. He just hates it when his Pokemon end up looking like that. What was Hatterene's reasoning for doing this? Well, simply put, when she was a Hattrem and Hatenna, she was able to move around more, and in doing so, she was able to keep up with the other members of the Gallade and Gardevoir line that Drax has, including Gyroblast, Griefist, Gallade, and Gardevoir, and his female Gyroblast as well, and Iron Valiant. And after evolving into Hatterene, she realized she couldn't move around that much anymore, and she didn't like that. And against Drax's wishes, she used the serum on herself that she also mixed with a bit of uh with a bit of Griefist's DNA, which caused not only her to change into that Pokemon human hybrid, but also caused her to end up changing in hair color. Her hair going from blue and pink that the normal Hatterene has to red and green. We also touched on Ash's seventh gym battle where he battled against Roxy. He only has one more gym battle to go until he's ready to enter the Unova League. And now, Drax, Ash, Iris, Silent, and the Team Rocket gang, or as we call them now, Team Drax, because they're not a part of Team Rocket anymore. Anyway, they are now moving on to the Ash's final gym, which is actually going to be Marlin's gym. Now, I don't actually remember what the name of the town that Marlin's gym is in, so forgive me if I keep calling it Marlin's gym's town. We continue our story with them heading towards the next nearest town. I don't remember what a lot of the towns in the Unova region are called, despite it being one of my favorite games, because I actually haven't played the Unova games in a long time, and I just recently got the Black and White 2 games back. So, yeah, because I lost both White version and Black version 2 a while ago. So, unfortunately for Drax, his stubborn Hatterene, who is now red and green and is tall, not taller than him, but taller than a normal Hatterene is, refuses to go back in her Pokeball and chooses to travel alongside the rest of the group. For everybody else who they come across to see, as Hatterene doesn't look like a normal Hatterene anymore. Luckily, he didn't have to buy new clothes for Hatterene, since she could just make her hair into said clothes. This is his Hatterene currently. Unfortunately for Drax, she wasn't the only one that chose to stay out. His Gardelade also had decided that she wanted to stay out of her Pokeball. And not for the exact same reasons. She chose to stay out of her Pokeball because, well, she just felt like staying out of the Pokeball. Luckily for Drax, Iron Valiant wasn't as much of a attention drawer as Hatterene was. If nobody looked hard, if no one looked too close, they wouldn't be able to tell she was a robot and not a well, they wouldn't be able to tell she's a robot, and they would know that they would think she's just a Gardevoir or a Gallade. Before they would go to the next gym, Drax actually needed to pick up some mechanical parts to actually upgrade Iron Gardelade's new features. After requiring said parts that he needed from the hardware store, he and the rest of the traveling group decided to stop by in a small clearing in the forest so Ash could train with his new Pokemon. And when I say new, I don't mean like new that recently caught. Well, I mean I guess his Kirlia was recently caught, but it recently evolved into Ghost type Gyroblast. So while Drax was working on Gardalade's upgrades, his Gardevoir, or as he called Greenie, due to the fact that one of her legs was actually completely green. If you can actually tell, like you can kind of see it right there, and kind of in there a little bit. Anyway, his Gardevoir, as well as his where's the picture? As well as his Alpha Lopunny, which he caught from a time distortion a while back, were currently sparring. And at some points when he does infuse his Pokemon with human DNA, they do gain a more human-like appearance, but other than that, they don't actually have a much of a different appearance. This effect only happens when the Pokemon is already humanoid. Unless it's already humanoid, this effect doesn't happen. So, for instance, if it was done on a regular Glaceon, it would still look like a regular Glaceon, but it would be able to speak human language. Unfortunately for Greenie, the Gardevoir, it was not doing too well, considering the Alpha Lopunny was much stronger and bigger, and Gardevoir can't really take physical hits very well. It was then decided that Drax's newest evolved Pokemon, Gyroblast, the female version, decided to jump in and assist Gardevoir. Despite the fact that they both weren't exactly physically tanky, Gyroblast is a more heavy-hitting Pokemon than Gardevoir is. And so both of them working together, with Gyroblast being able to distract Lopunny a bit more than Gardevoir was able to, they were actually doing a pretty good job at keeping Lopunny on her toes. That is until Drax's other Lopunny, not reading the room, decided to jump into the fight because he wanted to get some of his own training in. And yes, his other Lopunny is male. The only weird thing about it is how weird he looks. He's not a normal type like regular Lopunny. He is grounded in fighting. And this immediately caused both Gardevoir and Gyroblast to lose, which angered both of them, and including Lopunny as well, who immediately pounded the male Lopunny into the ground. Stop it. Everyone's attention was soon grabbed by Drax, who had now finished Gardalade's upgrades. In fact, she almost looked completely different, especially with the new colors that were added. Her lower legs, or her calves, were now painted red. Her entire torso and upper arms were green, with her forearms being the same color of red as her now lower legs. The weird dress thing that went around her waist had also been painted red and had been given a new design. The pigtails on her head had been made larger and draped down her back more than they used to, as well as her now having a more feminine figure. Doing this was not Drax's overall choice, and wasn't really something he planned on doing. But this was mainly to show that his Gardalade was female and not male. Because, once again, it's hard to tell sometimes with the Pokemon, because it's a combination of both Gardevoir and Gallade, even though it's a robot. This is Gardalade's new form, or her new upgraded appearance. Iris began making fun of Drax due to the fact that all of his Pokemon seemed to want to make him suffer. Silent, meanwhile, was more concerned about the fact of how many of the evolutions and, well, forms of the Ralts line he had, wondering how he managed to get that many. Drax said he just came across them on his journeys, and some of them wanted to join him. Drax then made a joke saying he could literally make an entire team with the 6 evolutions of Ralts that he has now, and Iron Valiant, because Iron Valiant technically isn't an evolution of Ralts. Gardalade then turned towards Drax and then said that he doesn't quite have all of the evolutions of the Ralts line yet, considering there are two others that he doesn't have. Drax looked over at her in question, arching an eyebrow. But I already have Gardevoir, Gallade, Griefus, Gyroblast, female Gyroblast, and you. Who else could I need? He didn't say this seriously because he knew that those were the only 6 that he knew of so far. Gardalade simply said, the Mega Evolutions. Drax facepalmed himself, forgetting that there were Mega Evolutions of Gardevoir and Gallade. But he knew that those technically already just counted as regular Gardevoir and regular Gallade, because both his Gardevoir and Gallade could do that once he found a Keystone and a Megastone for each of them. Gardevoir then questioned why he wouldn't want to permanently Mega Evolve those Pokemon, which Drax replied with, Mega Evolution isn't a permanent thing. He can't do that. Talking about Mega Evolution actually grabbed his Alpha Lopunny's attention, questioning about if it was possible for her species to Mega Evolve. Drax said it is, but Mega Lopunny is hard to find. All the Megastones are. Drax then added, plus Lopunny's already scary as is with her massive size and unstable temper. Remember, this isn't a regular Lopunny. Drax's Lopunny is a very aggressive and very territorial Pokemon, and it sees all of its traveling companions as its territory, basically its pack. I have a cut on my arm, and I don't know my hand, and I don't know where it came from. Weird. It was then that his Gardevoir spoke up, claiming that she has no concern for Mega Evolution, as she is perfectly fine the way she is, and that Mega Evolution might be a way of getting stronger, but she prefers things the way they are. She's not much of a fighter as is anyway. She only trains to get stronger in case she actually needs to fight. Gallade also said he was not interested, but more to the fact that he didn't want to have to deal with a cape getting in his way of battle. If it wasn't obvious already, Drax's Gallade has a bit of a different mindset than regular Gallades. He still has that devoted to protecting his trainer thing going on with him, but he also isn't as chivalrous as other Gallades are. He's not against using underhanded tactics to win, because in his eyes, if you're going to fight, you're going to fight to protect the ones you care for, and you're going to fight by whatever means necessary. He doesn't get along with other Gallades very well, due to this mindset. Gardalade then turned towards Drac with a bit of a smirk on her face before saying that he might have to catch 2 more Ralts if that's the case, if he's going to have the Mega Evolutions too. Drax replied with, I really don't want to have to end up mixing up my Gardevoir and Gallade with another Gardevoir and Gallade, because, it's hard to tell the difference between 2 Gardevoir and 2 Gallade. Silent then started laughing, and Drax turned to him questioningly, Silent then replying with, that might not be as much of a problem as you think it is. Drax raised an eyebrow before Silent and Iris pointed behind him. Drax turned around only to come face to face with a shiny Gardevoir. He stared back at the Gardevoir for a second before asking, how long have you been standing there? The Gardevoir simply replied, because his translator's nearby. Remember, this Gardevoir doesn't have the same ability to speak English like the other ones do, but he has the translator so he can understand her. Replied with, since the Mega Evolution line. Meanwhile, Gardevoir, Iron Valiant, and the rest of the evolutions of the Ralts line were all laughing at Drax uproariously at his odd stroke of luck, finding a shiny Gardevoir behind him. Iron Valiant then responding with, looks like you're going to have to find a way to permanently Mega Evolve her. Drax glared at his Iron Valiant before saying, I still don't know if there's an actual way to permanently Mega Evolve somebody. To that, Glaceon simply replied, hey, you've already managed to give 2 other Pokemon the ability to change type at will, one by accident, but still. Yes, at this point in time, Glaceon has been given the ability to change type at will, but I haven't gotten all the pictures of her different types drawn yet, so. Eventually, the group came to the next town over. As they walked into the Pokemon Center, however, Drax noticed a very familiar person along with several henchmen following him around, preaching about how humans should release their Pokemon from human captivity. Drax then hollered at them to get their attention. Team Plasma, I thought I got rid of you idiots already. Ash looked at him confused. Team Plasma? In other words, they're a more weird version of Team Rocket, but for some reason are against people having Pokemon on their side. Also, excuse my language, but their boss is a piece of shit. The Team Plasma grunts looked at him, and the leader that was leading them around, I think his name is Zinzalin. Yeah, that's his name. He recognized Drax, and immediately got angered, and said, we are not as weak as we were the last time you battled with us. Now that we know what your Pokemon are capable of, we can handle you this time. However, unfortunately for Team Plasma, they had not actually done their research on how much more Pokemon, or how much more powerful Drax's team was. Upon hearing them thinking they could take him on with their team, whatever it might be, he got ready to send out his Pokemon. As the Team Plasma Grunt sent out multiple Pokemon, Drax only used one Pokemon, sending out his Glaceon. Now, You're probably wondering why just as Glaceon. Well, there's a reasoning behind that. Now, initially, now remember, there's a reason why Glaceon looks the way she does. Remember, he was trying to get. Remember what he was trying to do when he was well, actually, when Glaceon ended up the way she did. He was only trying to give her the ability to speak English. But remember one of his other projects from the past, the ability to give other Pokemon the ability Battle Bond. Now, Glaceon actually does have this ability, but she's never actually used it yet, because of the fact that there was no need to. The reason that she looks like this is because he accidentally mixed the serum for the Battle Bond ability and the serum for being able to speak human language together. That is what caused Glaceon to turn out the way she did. The mixture of the ability to speak human DNA, which is made with human... being able to speak with human language, which is made with human DNA, and the Battle Bond ability serum. And the Battle Bond usually has the Pokemon take on the appearance of whoever their trainer is. But in this case, because of the serum being made with Lorelei's DNA, it ended up making Glaceon look like Lorelei. This was the first time Drax was going to use Glaceon's Battle Bond ability. Without warning, a heavy tornado of snow surrounded Glaceon. Her fur surprisingly turned a lighter shade of blue, and the little thing on her head, the blue thing that looks like a hat, that turned more into what looked like human like hair and turned black to match Drax's hair color, which normally you can't really see because of the hood he's wearing. Her forearms also appeared to get bigger, and she appeared to have a cape on her back now. This is Glaceon's Battle Bond form. It's unlike with Greninja, how he has the big water shuriken on his back. This Glaceon, because remember, Drax's Glaceon's a fighter. It likes to fight close up. And he doesn't know this yet, but his Glaceon's actually a fighting ice type now. He actually hasn't looked into the fact that Glaceon has the fighting type added due to her constant knack for liking to fight people with her hands. So now she has these big giant ice gauntlets on her over her fists instead of having the big water shuriken on her back. And if you haven't noticed yet, her shirt is now green instead of being the white that it was before. She has the part of Drax's exosuit that covers up his chest, but for her it's just the chest. Other than that, then she has the gauntlets. She also has this cape, which has the hood down. Her hair is also put into a ponytail on this because I figured it would be a lot cooler to have the ponytail. Drax's Glaceon proceeded to mop the floor with every single member of Team Plasma's Pokemon, using her new move that she dubbed Icicle Fist. Unlike the move Ice Punch, Icicle Fist is different in where it's a heavier hitting move and it hits multiple times. The move can hit up to 5 times, and every time it hits, it gets stronger and more quick. Now remember, because of the fact that this is Glaceon's first time using this form, the others actually can't see her complete form change, or can't see it very well due to the fact that the snowy, like, dome thing is still covering her up. Similar to how with Ash Greninja, his Greninja was not able to actually utilize its full power until the Battle Bond ability was used enough times. Anyway, Team Plasma fled the Pokemon Center, and Nurse Joy thanked Drax for this, before actually telling him that he had a package from his younger sister. Taking the package in hand, Drax opened the package to reveal clothing. He then pulled out one of the pieces of clothing and realized that it wasn't actually clothing for him, but it was for Glaceon. A note had actually come with the package, with Asterisk saying that Glaceon needs to have more clothes than just the outfit she has for her, which is, this outfit. She has a jacket too, but she tends to not wear it when the sun's out because of the fact of how hot it can get, and Glaceon being, an ice type. Speaking of Glaceon, when Drax turned towards Glaceon again, he noticed that her fur was still the same light color that it was before. It was a lighter color, and her hair, while not being black anymore, or like, the hair that's on her head, it was the hair that is back here, this hair right here, was actually a different shade of blue now, being the same shade of blue as this up here, as well as her little cresting looking like it was more part of the rest of her hair. Drax began to wonder if that was a side effect from using Battle Bond for the first time, due to the fact that, she already was partially human. He wondered if the Battle Bond ability will cause her to look more human over time, just with more obvious Pokemon features. After Drax gave Glaceon the new clothing, Glaceon went into the bathroom to change because he had his Pokemon are of course going to be sleeping in the same room that he's going to be sleeping in, but they're just going to be inside their Pokeballs for the most part. Glaceon then came out of the bathroom, but her outfit looked very much different from how the original one did. Her outfit consisted of a crop top short sleeve blue t-shirt, a black jacket that also had short sleeves on it, so it wasn't covering her arms, and what looked like workout shorts. But other than that, she looked mostly the same, other than her color being a bit different and her hair being tied into a ponytail instead of how it used to be. Drax's sister specifically chose this outfit because she knew how much Glaceon loved to fight, and she figured that having a skirt would get in the way. So now, this is what Glaceon's new outfit looks like, or at least one of her new outfits looks like. This is going to be the main one I show most often because I don't feel like drawing Glaceon in multiple different outfits. I did this one because I figured that Glaceon fighting in a skirt is still kind of like, not very good for fighting. Also, the colors I used in the original Glaceon picture looked off to me. I know that Glaceon normally isn't supposed to be this dark of blue, which is one of the reasons why it kind of bothered me a little bit. And I decided to make it look more like a Glaceon by making her fur a little bit of a lighter blue color. The thing is, I just didn't have the pencil I needed. It took me a while to actually find the pencil I needed, and unfortunately, I've actually used that pencil multiple times, and not much of it left. So, after witnessing Glaceon's new outfit, Drax once again looked up to the sky as though he was speaking directly to Arceus and said, "You're enjoying torturing me, aren't you?" Drax's new Gardevoir, who was looking at Glaceon's appearance, simply gave a, finger up because she doesn't have thumbs. I guess a thumbs up before looking at Drax and asking why she wears clothes. Drax simply said because unlike the rest of his Pokemon, Glaceon actually has an actual human body and not just the human shape. Several of his other Pokemon were affected by his serums by having their physical forms look a bit more human-like, but other than that, they didn't have actually any human features. Glaceon was a different exception because of the accidental serum she ended up drinking. Sorry, not drinking. He used the machine to actually do it. So unlike them, her human body is actually a human body and not just human-shaped. Drax, then looking at his newly caught shiny Gardevoir, decided that she needed a different name besides Gardevoir. Since he had two of them now, it was gonna be a bit difficult for him to just keep referring to her as Gardevoir when he had two of them. So he actually changed Greeny's nickname to Evergreen and changed his newly caught shiny Gardevoir's name to Azula due to her blue color. Glaceon, hearing that Drax nicknamed two of his Pokemon, and she already was aware of Gardalade's nickname, asked him why she hadn't given her or some of the other Pokemon nicknames. Drax simply replied with he didn't find it necessary since, well, it was easy to tell what they were, and they never asked for one. It was then that Glaceon asked for one, because of course she would. With the most blank look on his face, Drax simply said, "Okay, you're Frostbite now." Glaceon just stared at him for a second before saying, "How did you come up with that so fast?" Drax simply shrugged before saying, "I got a lot of cool nicknames in my head that I've already thought of calling you and the others." Serperior then popped out of her ball with somewhat of a bit of an irritated expression on her face before saying that she was his first Pokemon and why hasn't she got a nickname yet. Drax then sighed before out loud saying, "Okay, anybody else who wants a nickname, come out of your Pokeball." Every single one of his Pokemon of his main team and some of the members of his other teams came out. He named his Serperior Slither due to the fact that he couldn't really come up with anything better than that. His Gyroblast went by the name of Crosshairs. His Griefus took the name of Whiplash due to her mostly being in her Grass-type form for the most part. His female Gyroblast went with the name Sea Spray due to the fact that her claw cannon thing shoots like very compressed water that is very, very powerful. His male Lopunny went with the name Groundfoot, which Drax didn't actually name him on that one. He actually chose the name for himself, despite the fact that it was very uncreative. Drax actually said he was going to go with the name Shatter because it sounded cool, and because his kicks were strong enough to shatter the earth. Hearing this, he immediately decided to go with that name instead of Groundfoot. His Alpha Lopunny actually went with the name Titana due to her being the tallest out of all of Drax's Pokemon at the moment. Yes, she's even bigger than his superior, and if you don't know, superior is already like 10'10", so yeah, that's pretty big. His Hatterene went with the name Red. Why did she go with the name Red? Well, for one, she had actually seen the famous Pokemon trainer Red on TV on multiple occasions, and she was already kind of like red in more places than green, so it fit better than just being called, something like Hatterene. The rest of his Pokemon were perfectly fine with just being called by their species name. Finally, the group arrived in the town that had the final gym. Ash had not decided on what team he was going to use yet, but Drax was going to help him. The team that Ash eventually decided on was Pikachu, of course, Gyroblast, because Gyroblast can change type, even if it does revert back to Ghost type at the end, and Deerling. Now remember, his Deerling is actually a what's it called? Delta species, meaning it has a different type from what it normally is. It still has the grass type, but its other type is flying. So just imagine a Deerling with wings on its back, just a Pegasus Deerling. Now, unfortunately, I don't really remember what Pokemon Marlin has on his team, because I've only battled him once in my entire life, and it was when I first played Pokemon Black version 2 all the way through. So we're just going to skip over this battle and say that Ash won easily, but during the battle, Deerling evolved into Sawsbuck, so just imagine Sawsbuck with giant feathered wings now. Also, I'm sorry I don't have a picture of Ash's Delta species Deerling yet. It's because of the fact that, well, I'm not really good at drawing equines yet, like equine creatures, like deer and horse and Pegasus and stuff like that. I'm actually good at drawing the My Little Pony versions of the Pegasus unicorns and alicorns and stuff like that. But that's because I used to be an X-Pro and I learned how to do that. But these are not the same things. I have to draw them differently and make them look more like realistic ones. I'm not used to that yet. Ask me to draw a griffin, I can do that. Ask me to draw a dragon, I can do that. I cannot draw a deer for the life of me. Drax and the rest of the group began continuing their journey. As they were about to leave the forest, Meowth actually came across something and dug it out of the grass. It was a weird marble-looking thing with a weird DNA-looking design in the middle of it. Figuring that somebody dropped it, Meowth walked up to Drax and handed it to him, saying that somebody must have dropped a marble and they should return to the Pokemon Center. Drax, however, noticed what it was. It was not a marble. It was a keystone. He looked up to Arceus again and said, "You're just doing this to mess with me now, aren't you?" What's next? A Gardevoir falls out of the sky and lands on my head? To be fair, that's not what happened, but instead a golden ring opened up next to him and a Gardevoir was thrown into his face. Drax grabbed the Gardevoir, which was embedded into his forehead, and then mumbled to himself, "Great, now he's got the other legendaries on it." Meanwhile, in an unknown location, Arceus was just snickering to himself after the sneaky little trick he put Hoopa up to. It wasn't long after this that Gardevoir began pestering Azula began pestering Drax about finally being able to permanently Mega Evolve, but Drax kept telling her that he hadn't figured out a way to actually do this yet. It was then that Glaceon actually came up with an idea, asking Drax if he could do it by infusing her with the same serum that allows Pokemon to permanently speak human language that he used on them. Drax thought about this for a minute. He needed to figure out how to extract some of the powers from the Megastone in his hand, as well as the Keystone, so that it would be permanent. He managed to buy a syringe that was able to penetrate stone, and managed to pull some I guess essence of the stone out of both the stones. Unfortunately for him, while he wasn't looking, Red, being the sneaky little Hatterene that she was, added the same mixture that turned Glaceon into what she was to the serum when he wasn't looking. Now, why would Red do this? What is her reasoning for doing it? Well, simple, because she is initially Drax's adopted daughter, and like any adopted child who is mischievous, they like to mess with their parents. I should know, I'm one of those kids. After finishing the serum, Drax asked Azula if she was ready. Azula simply responded with the only thing that she was really not all that excited for was the two large spikes sticking out of her chest. Before testing it on Azula, he actually got some DNA from his from her and tested the a small drop of the serum on her blood cells, revealing that it did in fact work. And after watching it for a little bit, it turned out that it was permanent. So he then decided to use it on Azula. Unfortunately, though, like I said, Red was involved. Azula's new form was very reminiscent of her Mega Evolution, except it was slightly different. Due to her appearance looked like a combination of both the regular Gardevoir and the Mega Evolution. Her dress had certainly gotten poofier, and it was black now, like how Mega Gardevoir's is. She did have the gloves, but instead of going to her elbow, they went all the way up to almost to her shoulder. The orange spike things that protruded out of her back were seemingly laid flat against her chest, or were part of the dress now instead of being part of her body. They had seemed to take on the appearance of more of a design on the dress to match with where her chest would be. The top of her dress, though, was blue, the same shade as her hair, and the inside of her dress, where you could see like the inside of the skirt, like with Gardevoir, that was the same color as well. But Drax immediately noticed what was going on when he saw her more human-like face and the fact that she had more hair than she had before. Her hair looking more like actual hair than looking like Gardevoir. Gardevoir's head thing, helmet, I don't know. He also noticed the very obvious human-shaped figure and the very obvious human body that she had. Drax immediately turned his head towards Red, knowing that she was responsible for this. But surprisingly, Azula was not really all that bothered by her new appearance. In fact, her dress was actually shorter than Mega Gardevoir's dress normally was, which allowed her to still move around a bit, even though she could float. Red just had a smug smirk on her face, knowing that even though not all the Pokemon would want this, she is still planning on keeping on doing this in the future if she could get away with it. Unbeknownst to Drax, Red was actually extremely intelligent. She somehow Drax's knowledge of his experiments had actually rubbed off on her, and she had actually learned how to do them herself, meaning that she always had the what she needed on hand in case she wanted to mess with her father again this way. And here is Azula's new form. Like I said, the orange thing sort of like turned into part of the dress instead of being part of the body, and her face is more human-looking than a regular Gardevoir's would be. Drax then wondered if he could possibly do this with Lopunny, despite the Megastone being a different kind of Megastone. He knew that all Megastones actually run off the same kind of energy, but like that they were made for different Pokemon. So once again, Drax made the serum, this time keeping a very close eye on Red. He tested the serum on one of some of Lopunny's blood to see if it would work. Surprisingly, it did. Her cells took on the Mega Evolution gene form that they tend to take on, but he still wanted to be sure. He plucked one of Lopunny's hairs off of one of her ears and tested it on that instead, and it had a weird effect that turned Lopunny's fur more rough instead of the cottony softness that it was before. In case you're wondering, this is what the texture of a Mega Lopunny's yellow fur feels like. This is not actually canon. That's just what I'm saying for the story. So Drax tried the serum on Lopunny. Lopunny at first was a bit surprised that she was already going to be able to permanently Mega Evolve, because this was actually something that she wanted. But the other Pokemon were somewhat worried due to the fact that Titana, which is her new name, she's very aggressive, and they were worried that this new fighting type ability would make her more aggressive. As she downed the serum, nothing happened. Drax was confused. Drax at first was kind of like not too concerned about this because he figured that it might not work. But then, out of nowhere, she suddenly began to change form into her Mega form, but then just changed back. Then she began to rapidly swap between the two forms before she then claimed that she could now swap between the two forms whenever she wants and just stay in whichever form she decides on. Drax was very intrigued by this, knowing that since the serum was not messed with by Red, that the form could be like swapped around with each other. Though it was then that Titania announced that she would rather just stay in the Mega form, as it would be more useful than her normal form, being a dual type. Now, because of all the rapid changing she was doing before, nobody actually noticed what the obvious notes of difference between the regular Mega Evolution and this version of the Mega Evolution. Unlike with what happened with Azula, this looked like the actual Mega Evolution, but there are a few things that were very much noticeable, like the fact that she looked like what happened with the Glaceon, just without the human features. She had the human shape, just not the human features. But the fact that they were so obvious kind of bothered Drax. He looked over at Red, and Red just simply put her hands up before saying, "I didn't do it." Drax then came to the conclusion that it must have to do with the fact that she was basically given two serums that had human DNA already put into them. In case you're wondering, this is what her Mega form looks like. It's got like I said, it looks similar to how Lopunny's looks, but unlike not Lopunny, like Glaceon's, but unlike Glaceon's form, this form isn't actually physically a human body, it just has the human shape. But other than that, everything else is the same. Now, I'm going to admit that I actually was a bit hesitant on giving Lopunny a permanent Mega Evolution form. I was going to do it with Gardevoir, but with Lopunny, I was a bit more hesitant on it because of the fact that, well, you know how the internet is. I've seen some weird shit. And while Lopunny is actually one of my more favorite Pokemon, but it's not because of the fact that it's of what it's based on, which is Playboy Bunny. I always just thought the design was unique and cool. And when it got a Mega Evolution, I actually really liked the Mega Evolution because I liked the thought of making Lopunny actually useful. I never felt like I could actually use Lopunny in any of the games because of the fact that, well, for being a normal type moves don't really give stab on any Pokemon and like super effective damage. So, but I really like the Mega Evolution, and I love the fact that it uses the ears to kind of like fight with. And so when I decided to give Lopunny the permanent Mega Evolution, I was actually hesitant on giving it like the human-shaped body when it came to the story. The main reason I didn't want to do it is because, well, I don't want people seeing me as one of those Rule 34 artists. And yes, I know that there's definitely Rule 34 of Lopunny and Gardevoir out there. I've seen it before on just my regular Google searches, which I don't like seeing. Pokemon is like my childhood, and I found it kind of disturbing whenever people like turned Pokemon like just randomly human without like any actual reasoning behind it. Specifically making them human and giving them like large assets. But also I didn't want to, be seen as one of those people, because I'm really not like that. But the main reason I decided to go with this route is because of the fact that there's another series I'm working on that is not related to Pokemon in any way, shape, or form, or for that matter, any other series. That series which is my own creation, is made for a more older audience, and it's got more mature humor in it. And all of the characters also have more mature designs. And sometimes I'm not very good at drawing Pokemon with in the Pokemon style. I'm just not good at it. You can even see it in my character's design right here. He doesn't exactly look like a regular Pokemon character with his design. His features and overall appearance in general doesn't look like what you'd expect from one of the Pokemon characters. So, let me give you an example of what the characters look like from that series. Here's one. So this is a recent character I recently designed for the series. I don't have a name for said character yet, but she's supposed to be an alien from another planet full of bug-like creatures. And this is here, 1 second. That's what she looks like. I actually did base the design of the character partially off of the Pokemon Ledian. I don't remember what it's called. It's a Pokemon I don't use very often, but the design could have been better in my opinion. But that's one of the reasons why I don't really I have a hard time drawing some Pokemon stuff, because it doesn't really it makes it hard for me to input my art style into that. So I decided to take some liberties and somehow put my art style into some of the Pokemon. And the way I decided to do that is by actually giving a reason as to why they look like that, instead of just making them like that for no reason. It's also one of the other reasons why I haven't drawn any of the human female characters and just have Drax, because once again, it's hard to draw female human characters in a style that's not my style, because that's the majority of what my artwork is in those designs. It's to a point where it's become a habit that's just kind of how I draw female characters by default, and it's the same with male characters. I actually tried to change the design to look a bit more like Pokemon related things with this design, but it still ended up looking more like my regular art with male characters. Like, for the most part, all the male characters and all the female characters have the exact same body type for like each. Like, all the female characters have the same body type, all the male characters have the same body type. I did this because it's hard for me to change between body types for certain people, and because well, I've got this whole thing where I don't really see the appeal in people's bodies very much. I know that sounds weird, but that's just kind of how it is. So my logic was basically taking all the female characters and male characters and making them have the exact same body type on both sides, so that nobody can choose a character to be their favorite based on what they look like, and they have to pick based on like their overall design and and like personality. Because like all of them have like different hairstyles or different like outfits and stuff, but at the end of the day, they all have the exact same body types. So everyone else has got to pick their favorite character based on the personality and their powers even. And I guess sometimes the color scheme. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Back to the story. Anyway, at this point, Drax was pretty much fed up with all the shenanigans that have been going on around him, and just out of like pure what's the word? Exasperation. He looked up into the sky and said, "What's next? A pretty girl gonna fall from the sky and land on Ash?" That's exactly what happened. The girl in question that fell from the sky was a girl with a mixture, a similarly, I guess it would be like a honey blonde color. I don't really know what color her hair is. Anyway, she was also currently wearing pink pajamas, as though she had just gotten out of bed. Drax turned around with a wide-eyed expression, with also a bit of disturbed look on his face. He went over to the two and helped them up, the girl in question having messy hair and not knowing where she was. But then her attention focused on Ash, and she seemingly recognized him. Ash, though not as dumb as he is in the original series, actually does recognize this girl, because at this point, he hasn't been on his journey long enough to forget about this person yet. Or at least that's how I think it is. Ash exclaimed, "Serena?" Yes, I'm putting Serena into the story this earlier on. Why? Well, because I have reasonings behind that, and because Serena is also my favorite female Pokemon character that traveled with Ash. "Great, expand the group more, why don't you?" said Drax under his breath. At least he just walked up and put a hand on Drax's shoulder, comforting him. Their now first order of business was to get Serena actual clothes that could fit her. Or not that could fit her, that actual clothes for traveling around instead of just having, pajamas all the time. As well as notifying her mother of where they were. Luckily, her mother was understanding, but was more confused at the fact that seemingly the god of Pokemon was devoting his time to messing with Drax. Serena had managed to pick out an outfit for herself, and they continued on their journey, with Serena and Ash talking animatedly to one another as old friends would. Drax and Superior, however, did notice the way Serena looked at Ash every now and then, and discreetly to Superior, Drax said, "Oh, she wants his ass," and Superior simply nodded with a smirk on her face. However, when Hatterene came out of her Pokeball for the first time since Serena had joined, or Red is her actual name, she actually looked at Serena and was actually somewhat interested in her outfit choice. Red then used her form-changing ability to change form into her normal type form. Now, none of Drax's Griefist, Gyroblast, or Red have ever turned into their normal type form, because he didn't see it necessary to see the normal type form, because, it's the normal type form. However, what Red's appearance looked like kind of surprised him. Red's overall appearance matched Serena's, including in hair color. Well, sort of. She had the hat shape that Serena had on her head, and her mid area was also the same shade of black. So if you're wondering, basically, Serena has her outfit that she has at the beginning of XY. And this surprised Drax. Drax had no idea that the normal type forms could take on the appearance of other trainers, with Griefist actually responding with the normal type forms take on the appearance of their trainer. But then Drax looked over at Red and said, "Why didn't she take on my appearance then?" Before Red simply said, "Your outfit is terrible." Drax was slightly offended by this before somewhat agreeing with her because he didn't really have any fashion sense. Anyway, this is Hatteran's normal type form, taking on the appearance of Serena, like I said. Anyway, the 9 traveling companions, yes, there's 9. We got Team Rocket, which is 3. We got Ash, Drax, and Elisa, which is another 3. And then we got Cylon, Iris, and Serena, which is another 3. So there's 9 people traveling together now. Anyway, they continued on their journey and eventually came to the Pokemon League. Ash was very psyched for this. Now, initially going through his first league battle, he actually only had 5 Pokemon. I said that he had 6, but I never actually had him catch a 6th Pokemon, I don't think. So, yeah, he only had 5 Pokemon through that, and that's why he lost. But this time he has more than 6, so he can actually has more variety this time around. While Ash was focusing on the Unova League, Drax took some time to himself to help his Pokemon train, and some of them adjust to their new forms. Specifically, the ones that were permanently Mega Evolved, and some of the others who didn't get enough training. So basically, his Regional Lopunny and his Alpha Lopunny, or Mega Alpha Lopunny, I should say. However, while they were training, Drax noticed weird reactions between his 2 Lopunny. Specifically, that his Mega Alpha Lopunny, or Titana, was now eyeing Shatter with a different look in her eyes. Originally, she had a more irritated personality towards Shatter because of how immature Shatter could be. But Drax recognized this look because it was the same exact look that Serena constantly gave Ash, except a lot more intense. After an intense training session between Titana and Shatter, Shatter once again lost. He constantly loses, even though Drax still values him as a very, very important member of his team. However, what happened after the battle was surprising, as Titana grabbed Shatter by the leg and dragged him into the nearby forest. With Shatter screaming in terror, wondering if he was going to get his ass handed to him again because he was worried about getting beaten to a pulp. "Should we help them? Help him?" said Superior. Drax simply said, "Nah, I think he'll be fine." Surprisingly, after the day had come and gone, both Titana and Shatter were still missing. They hadn't come back yet, but Drax assumed they would eventually. He left a note by where they were training to let them know that they had gone to bed. The next morning, they came out to see if Titana and Shatter had returned, and they had. And Titana was holding an egg. Drax and his Pokemon simply stared at the two for a minute before Glaceon simply said, "Holy shit, that was fast." Shatter was visibly traumatized, and Drax assumed that he was blushing but couldn't tell with all of his fur in the way. Titana had one of her arms wrapped around Shatter and was was pulling him very close to her body, and she also had a rather calm smile on her face. Upon seeing them, Shatter was giving Drax a look that said, "Help me, please." However, when Drax took a look in Titana's direction, he noticed that Titana was giving him a look that said, "You try it." Slither looked between the 2 Lopunnies and Drax before saying, "Did you turn Titana into a Yandere?" And then Drax simply said, "I think I did, yeah." All of them turned around and just walked back to the building with Shatter looking up at Lopunny with a bit of fear and somewhat worry in his eyes. Ash had actually already beaten Trip, and now he was down to fighting that one kid that has the High Dragon and Lucario. I don't remember his name. During the battle, Ash's Zorua evolved into Zoroark finally, which looked terrifying to everybody else because of how much different it looked from regular Zoroark. And because, the malicious look in its eyes. Or her eyes, because his Zoroark's female. Drax's is male, and also is still a Zorua. It hasn't evolved yet. Luckily for Ash, he had already managed to defeat the kid's High Dragon, and was now just down to his Riolu, now who'd also evolved into Lucario. Unfortunately for Lucario, none of his fighting type moves could actually do anything to Zoroark, because while the Unova one was Dark type, this one was normal Ghost, meaning it was immune to fighting type moves. With a single call of Bitter Malice, Lucario was knocked out unconscious, Ash winning that one. Ash then went on to win the entirety of the Unova League, using more than just the Pokemon he caught in the Unova region. During all of his battles, of which Oshawott finally evolved into Dewott, and Krokorok evolved into Krookodile. Now, you may have noticed I skipped over some of the movies in black and white. Well, that's because I didn't really see them as worth talking about. They, for the most part, happen exactly the same, except for one of them. That movie of which being Genesect and the Legend Awakened. Now, why am I covering this movie? Because remember, this Mewtwo is seemingly different from the Mewtwo that Ash met back in the first movie, meaning that I actually believe that it's a different Mewtwo. Because it seems that this Mewtwo went through different ways of when it was created than the Mewtwo that we first meet. And Ash obviously did recognize it when he first saw it in the movie, so I'm thinking that they're both different Mewtwo. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going to have that movie be a part of the story. Now, how do we start this movie? Well, for starters, the first part of the movie with Mewtwo meeting the Genesect goes exactly the same, with the Genesect being extremely hostile to Mewtwo and such like that. However, things change when Genesect meets Ash and his friends for the first time, because this time Ash and his friends are already in that watery area where he meets the Genesect for the first time, and Drax also happens to be sitting on the shore, sitting on the grass. I mean, with some of his Pokemon, watching Ash and his Pokemon train. The small Genesect, the one that talks the most, and the one that Ash becomes friends with, actually approaches and sort of sits next to Drax and his Pokemon, but from a distance away. Drax noticed the Genesect, but also noticed that it seemed rather timid, so he tried to pretend that he didn't notice. The Genesect, however, noticed that Drax noticed it, but instead of being scared, it also noticed when he seemingly pretended that he didn't see it. Out of curiosity, the Genesect approached a bit closer. It was curious about this creature, not knowing what he was. But the aura he was giving off wasn't really all that threatening. And despite the fact that most of his face was shadowed under the weird piece of fabric that he had on his head, he seemed to be very kind-hearted, and his Pokemon seemed very attached to him. The Genesect eventually found itself sitting directly next to Drax, along with the rest of his Pokemon, feeling somewhat comfortable around these people and other Pokemon. And even though the trainer that he was watching was rather, or not trainer, the creature he was watching train with the other equally strange creatures was rather intense and loud, Genesect could also feel that he was equally as kind. Drax eventually spoke to Genesect, asking what kind of Pokemon it was. Genesect did not know what a Pokemon was, or what the word meant. It only knew that when it woke up, it wasn't the same, and that it was different somehow. Drax, taking in the appearance of the Genesect, wondered if Genesect was a Kabutops before of what happened to it, because it had a similar shape to Kabutops. Drax turned on his personalized Pokedex and scanned through the pictures until he found a picture of Kabutops and showed it to Genesect, asking if this is what it used to look like. Genesect looked at the image of the creature for a minute before nodding yes, that's what it used to look like. Drax then talked to Genesect a bit, saying how much different it looked now, and while it still looked like a Kabutops, it seemed to be more of a different Pokemon entirely now, despite the fact that it was once a Kabutops. Genesect was confused at this, but then Drax told it to think of it as a form of reincarnation, which then Drax had to explain what reincarnation was, and that while this Genesect might have the memories of its past, it also was now in a new body, meaning while it was the same person from before, it was also a different person at the same time. Or he said that Genesect could simply think of it as it's the same person but a new body, a more powerful body. It was at this point that Mewtwo actually showed up. The other Genesect actually hadn't come looking for their comrade yet. When Mewtwo saw the Genesect sitting with Drax and his Pokemon, Mewtwo was going to say something, but then took note of a few of the Pokemon that looked different. Not different as she'd never seen them before, but different as they were obviously changed. Mewtwo then glared towards Drax, thinking that he had done this to the Pokemon, which of course he did, but not against their will. Surprising her, however, was when she was about to fire a Shadow Ball, and the Glaceon got in the way and blocked it. The Glaceon then shouted at Mewtwo, telling him how Drax had actually helped him helped him out when he was being held by Giovanni, but still, for some reason, attacked him unprovoked. Mewtwo was confused at this, as she didn't know who this Giovanni was. She then looked at Drax and asked, said, "I have never seen you before in my life." Drax was shocked at this, at the female voice coming from Mewtwo's mind to his brain. Drax then said, "You're not the same Mewtwo I met." The Mewtwo froze in his statement. Same Mewtwo? There was another Mewtwo? Drax explained that he had actually met a Mewtwo a while back when he was first starting his journey with Ash, and that he had saved the Mewtwo from being used as a weapon by by an evil man named Giovanni. The Mewtwo rushed forward and gripped Drax's shoulders tightly before exclaiming that it wanted to meet this Mewtwo. Drax unfortunately did not know whatever happened to this Mewtwo. All he knew is that after meeting said Mewtwo, it vanished and he hasn't seen it since. Genesect was confused about this Pokemon, saying that there was another one of it. There were 5 of her kind. I'm just going to call the Genesect a her from now on because it clearly has a female voice. But then Genesect asked the question as why she would be surprised that there was another one of her. Shouldn't there always be more than just one? Drax explained that there are actually usually very few of certain legendary Pokemon, and that Mewtwo was actually created in a laboratory similar to how Genesect was created. Or I guess reincarnated. He explained that both Mewtwo were clones of the Pokemon Mew, and that they weren't regular Pokemon, that they were basically lab experiments, similar to his Pokemon, except they were not created out of kindness. Genesect then looked at some of Drax's other Pokemon and asked if they were similar to her as well. Drax said some of them are, but not all of them. He explained about why all of his Pokemon looked different, and some of them looking even mutated or abnormal, explaining as to how they ended up that way, and that he would have never done that to them without their permission. Mewtwo also realizing that she had judged this boy before actually getting to know him. Mewtwo then did something that surprised Drax, sending out a large Psywave that seemingly covered a large area, not knowing that it actually covered the entire planet. This isn't the move Psywave, it's a wave of psychic power that is meant to alert all the other psychic types of her being there. Surprisingly, the effect was rather instant, as the Mewtwo that Drax had met before appeared suddenly. He looked at Drax in recognition, before then gazing at the new Mewtwo in rather interest and somewhat shock. The Mewtwo's began to talk to each other for a while. The new Mewtwo showing off her Mega Evolution, which surprised Drax that she could actually do that on command, when he actually had to perform an experiment for Titana to be able to do that. Mewtwo, however, the original one, was shocked. He didn't know what this was, but he was very interested in it. He wanted to know if it was possible for him to do that as well. Drax said that it should, because Mewtwo is, well, the same, unless they were created differently. After explaining how to do it, the original Mewtwo attempted to try this Mega Evolution tactic, but it did not work, unfortunately. It seemed that both of these Mewtwo were created differently. But then Drax spoke up, saying that he actually has a way for Mewtwo to be able to Mega Evolve, although he doesn't know if he's capable of it, if he has the abilities in his DNA to do so. He also said that if he doesn't, he can actually give him make it so that he does have the capabilities to Mega Evolve. Turns out the original Mewtwo did not have those capabilities, but just by getting some blood from the original Mewtwo and mixing the serums, making a serum that allowed Mewtwo to actually have the Mega Gene, Mewtwo was now able to Mega Evolve. He then made the same serum that allowed his Lopunny to be able to swap between Mega Evolutions, or swap in and out of Mega Evolution at will. This resulted in Mega Mewtwo X, surprisingly. Mewtwo's Mega Evolution was not the same as Mega Mewtwo Y's as the other Mewtwo, but it was easy to tell the two apart now whenever they would Mega Evolve. Aside from the now who he called the female Mewtwo having a bit of a lighter shade of color compared to the Mewtwo that he knew. Her shade being more of a palish or like a light purple, and then Mewtwo's being a dark purple. The original Mewtwo thanked Drax for this new ability. Drax said there was no need to thank him, as now he could help more Pokemon that way, if that's what he'd been doing the entire time. Mewtwo said he'd actually been sort of isolating himself away from the rest of the world in fear of the mostly away from the rest of the humans, not knowing if he could trust any beyond, well, him and his friends. It was then that both Mewtwo looked at each other for a second before then looking to Drax and requesting that he capture both of them. Drax asked why they would want that when they were already enslaved by humans before and had both been seemingly tortured by them, and why they would request this of someone like him who was no one special, especially from the new Mewtwo who had just recently met him. The old Mewtwo responded that he was the only human that, even though he was one of the few humans he'd met, that had actually helped him and freed him, as well as it didn't even attempt to try and capture him when first seeing him. He also then pointed out that Drax had, given him the power to do the same thing that the new Mewtwo could, even though it was a bit different than hers. Drax thought about it for a second before deciding that he would let them come with him, or he would take up their offer. Though he decided to give the second Mewtwo the name Mew 3 because she was created after the original Mewtwo. Mewtwo said that was a dumb name before saying that it would be better to just call them both by a different name. Drax thought for a minute before deciding on the perfect names. He noticed that while they were the same species, they both had very differing personalities, with the first Mewtwo being a bit more quiet and as well as a bit more aggressive, while the other Mewtwo was more gentle, but equally gentle and more out and spoke more. So he decided on the names Yin and Yang, specifically because those names fit them very well. One being the dark side, being Yin, the first Mewtwo, the other being the light side, being Yang, the second Mewtwo. After speaking with the Mewtwo a bit more, it was Yang that decided to ask Drax about how he managed to turn his Glaceon into this humanoid slash Pokemon hybrid. Drax told him that it was an accident, and told him about the accident and how it happened. But then when Yin asked about the other Pokemon that were already humanoid but had a more human-like shape, he said that giving them human DNA to speak English, or the serum that he made specifically, caused this. Yang asked if it was possible for this to happen to her and the new Mewtwo, so that when they were in their regular forms and not their mega forms, Drax could be able to tell the difference between the two easier. Drax said that wouldn't really be a problem with the fact that Yang actually had a little bit of a brighter hue than Yin did, but he said that it could be possible. Yin and Yang decided to think on it for a while because they didn't know if they wanted that to happen just yet. Besides, they could both use telepathy anyway, so it's not like they had to really worry about being able to speak English or, other languages. After all that was said and done, the other 4 Genesects showed up, and at first were hostile, but then realized that the other Genesect that was with these humans and a second, for some reason, now two creatures of what they saw before, was not feeling threatened, instead was simply enjoying company with these creatures. The other Genesect began to talk in their native language, asking about this human and these other creatures. The other Genesect saying that they meant no harm, and also explained to them what had happened to their world and how it was different now, and how they weren't the same, but they were also that they were in different bodies now. The leader Genesect walked over to Drax, obviously being more noticeable due to his red color, and simply told Drax, "Thank you for watching over the young one." The smaller Genesect and the red Genesect then began talking for a bit before the red Genesect then nodded, and the other 4 seemingly decided to leave and go their own way. But the other Genesect stayed behind, wanting to sort of travel with the group. Drax asked the reasoning behind the small Genesect's choice, and the Genesect said it wanted to see the world, and that while it wasn't ready to be captured yet, it would still want to travel around with everybody. Drax smiled and said he'd be all right with that. He'd be okay even if it didn't want to be captured. It was her choice after all. Although Drax was slightly inspired by Genesect's appearance, he wondered if he could actually make his own Pokemon and bring it to life without having to force a reincarnation like Team Plasma did with Genesect. However, this would be a story for another day, as this is the end of Part 4. If you guys enjoyed, like and subscribe, or don't, I don't really care. I'm just doing this for fun, not really for subscribers or anything like that. So I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.